Calling someone a criminal is one thing. Being a criminal is another. I didn't live the best of lives, and we barely got by. Then it all changed when one day I pushed my best friend, like I always did. But I think it was too hard because he fell and he bled. Before I could even react, the red on the ground matched the red flashing around me. I felt a hand on my shoulder and they took me away. This 16-year-old wasn't a child anymore, not to them at least. I was a murderer being locked up, probably because no one heard me cry.
देश में नाबालिग अपराधियों का ग्राफ लगातार तेजी के साथ बढ़ रहा है.
Would one be secured if after 2 or 3 years of some juvenile home they come out on the streets and commit that kind of offence again?
राज्यसभा में आज जुवेनाइल जस्टिस बिल पेश किया जाएगा. विरोधी दलों से संकेत मिल चुके हैं कि आज बिल पास हो जाएगा, यानी अब किसी निर्भया का न्याय अधूरा नहीं होगा.
How would I have reacted? I would have probably taken out a gun and shot the person.
Lowering the age will be a step backwards and a knee-jerk reaction.
It certainly will stop 16-year-olds from going into a thana and saying, मैंने जी जुग्गी को आग लगा दी है, मुझे जेजे में डाल दो.
Treats children as adults, which is simply wrong, morally, legally, constitutionally, ethically and emotionally.
I think they served. The bill is passed.
But it was very clearly, an immediate response to the kind of media attention that the tragedy of the girl called Nirbhaya, who was raped and murdered in Delhi, provoked. One of our attackers was said to be a juvenile, and there was a lot of bloodlust around. People wanted something that will punish him more than the year and a half or less that he was going to get in a juvenile home.
And I know that some media organizations decided to actively lobby for this law.
So that one hard case was seen as the reason, and certainly supported by big headlines based on wrong facts.
It is quite alarming that you allow laws to change, legislations to change, not on rationale, not on logic, but on emotion.
Of all the 472 million children in our country, a grand total of 1.2% have committed any crimes at all. Of that, something like 3% or so have committed both rape and murder. So you're talking about 3% of 1%. Where are you getting some sort of major crime wave?
We don't know how to handle crime, we don't know how to handle children, and the easiest solutions is to make your laws more punitive.
We are in a situation in which children are being condemned to a life of criminality thanks to this awful bill.
The Juvenile Justice Act, first introduced in 1986, mandated for the separate trial of the child, now referred to as juvenile, for those under the age of 16 for boys and 18 for girls. India then passed the Juvenile Justice Act of 2000 after signing on to the United Nations Conventions of Child Rights in 1992, raising the maximum age of juvenility to 18. It added on to the children in conflict with the law, a child found or alleged to have committed an offence before having turned 18, with the category of children in need of care and protection, those without a stable home or any means of subsistence. Notable cases involving juveniles, such as the Nirbhaya case and the Shakti Mills case, caused an uproar. This led to the 2000 Act being replaced by the Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection Act of 2015. The Act categorizes crimes into 3 categories according to the Indian Penal Code. Crimes incurring punishments of up till 3 years are classified as petty offences, 3 to 7 years are classified as serious offences, and punishments of 7 years or beyond are put under heinous offences. Most controversially, children who commit heinous offences in the age group of 16 to 18 years can now potentially be tried as adults. However, the Act strictly mandates that a child cannot be given a maximum sentence of life imprisonment or capital punishment.
There is no reasoning why you believe that a 15-year-old can be reformed and a 17-year-old cannot be reformed.
It's a very logical connotation, because in many other countries, much younger people, age of 14, etc., also treated as adults.
In America, some places hanging कर देता है, 100 साल सजा दे देता है. ऐसे होना चाहिए in our country also.
there is no biological reason for why we draw the universal age line for a child and an adult at 18, right? The closest biological determinant that you can come to is that a person's prefrontal cortex is usually developed by a certain age. That age usually lies around 25 to 27. It does not lie at 18.
In 2015, when this evidence was produced in the UK courts, the US courts in 2005, which has led to abolition of death penalty, abolition of life imprisonment without parole, abolition of life imprisonment. A lot of changes have happened after that report. So therefore, going to 1995, when US introduced the penal consequences for children in 2015, makes no sense to me.
And of course, it creates a lot of other slippery slopes for the kind of laws which may be laid down with this as precedent also, right? That if you've said that we think you're almost an adult at 16, it's so easy for those boundaries to keep shifting as well.
With the age bar falling lower, juveniles can often be taken for adults and thrust into the criminal system. With improper age determination, that isn't far from reality.
The Juvenile Justice Act itself says how the age is to be determined. They're saying first you go by the obvious appearance and then go by any certificate which they have, whether from an educational institution or from a panchayat or a municipality and so on. And only when these things are not there, then you go in for ossification.
तो जो भी 18 साल के अंदर वो क्या करते हैं कि अगर मोच आ गई है, दाढ़ी आ गई है, तो फिर उसको 18 साल के ऊपर है और उसको लिख देते हैं। अगर उसको पूछते हैं कि 18 साल के अंदर है, उनका काम बढ़ता है ज़्यादातर। इसके लिए वो फिर ये 18 साल के ऊपर दिखता है, डाल दो जेल में। बहुत सारे केसेस में ऐसे भी होता है।
Ramdev Chauhan is a case in point. It was a case of triple murder by a 14.5 years old. And the first court did get a medical board appointed. It did do the medical and said, according to the reports, he was certainly not, he was in the age group of 14 to 15. That was the medical report. That was his school register. And even then the judges said, no, this is not reliable. Some cross-examination took place and his age was determined to be 19 on the date of the offence. He was given death penalty by the first court. So after 18 years of this boy being in prison, we were finally able to get him out when finally the Assam High Court said, yes, he was 14 and 15 between the age of that.
A juvenile, they called me, but I wasn't treated like one. The khaki verdis, the black coats, an entire courtroom, all staring at me. I tried telling them it was my best friend, nothing more than an accident, but who was listening? Those psychologists? They weren't there for me. Pendencies, lawyers' fees, typing keys, but all I heard in return was guilty. I looked old enough to them. Why shouldn't I be punished? They dragged me away from my entire life, dumped me into a home away from home.
Psychologists are very rarely seen as a part of the juvenile justice system, and a lot of that has to do with organizations coming forward and saying that we'll be present here and we'll make sure that these services are created. However, this isn't something that the government has taken up as of now.
Supposing the state does not provide a prosecutor, does it mean that the NGO should provide a prosecutor? I don't think so. So really it is for the state to make sure that psychologists or psychiatrists or counselors or whoever is required to assist the Juvenile Justice Board must be made available.
When it comes to counselors and counseling in the Juvenile Justice Board, there is no clear process that is standardized or followed by every single therapist.
There are no psychological assessments which are foolproof, which can tell you that if you follow XYZ test, it is bound to tell you whether the person has an adult-like mind or a child-like mind.
However, in the implementation of giving access to things such as counseling or therapy for these children, there are no clear allocation of funds that happen or clear vacancies that have been created for these processes.
The fund allocation is essentially for those who can be reformed and to give them some training. And the budget is in fact quite substantially larger than before.
गवर्नमेंट का फंड जो है वो नहीं है ज़्यादातर, अगर होता भी है तो अमाउंट थोड़ा होता है, इतने सारे फॉर्मेलिटी होती है कि हमारा साल ख़त्म हो जाता है तो पैसा भी नहीं आता है जल्दी.
Yes, there is a fund, but we are not aware of that at all. And in the past 2 years which I have been a member, we have not been given any information on the provision of such fund, and nor have we utilized it.
Well, there was supposed to be juvenile justice funds set up by every state and union territory. There's nothing from the central government. The central government expected that each state would collect the necessary money. Estimates were in the neighborhood of 50 crores per state. But some states have barely 10 lakhs, and of the 10 lakhs in one particular state, I'm told they'd only spent 1 lakh. So it's not as if it's a serious money being spent.
Even with minimalistic investment, we have actually been able to bring down recidivism. Doesn't that speak for itself? So if we were actually to make enough investment and really work on reforming these young boys, we could achieve wonders.
The juveniles accused of committing petty or serious offences are sent to observation homes, and if convicted, are then sent to remand homes. And those juveniles of 16 to 18 accused or convicted of heinous offences are sent to a place of safety.
No, place of safety is an alternative to, instead of being sent to a regular jail, it's like a halfway house, that they are kept there, and so that they are not suddenly sent into a harsh milieu.
I call it a magical place under this legislation, which will cater to everybody's need, which will be making everybody reformed. When all this radical element and the murders and the rapists and all the serious offenders will come together and they will be reformed. I don't understand the whole approach of the legislation.
Most part of the country, place of safety do not exist. So there are ad hoc arrangements being made, Sometimes some part of a jail is designated as a place of safety. Sometimes some part of an already running observation home, a place of safety. For example, one room in an observation home will be designated as a place of safety.
These particular institutions have to be up to the mark, and as the rules specify, what kind of space should be there, that they should get not only education but also some vocational skills.
These homes may have a primary school teacher or some social worker who will come and teach the children A, B, C, D, E repeatedly, day in, day out. They will be asked to sit in that empty classroom from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. without moving, without saying anything, without asking any questions, and just listen to that A, B, C, D, E repeatedly. If they ask or if they respond to anything, they will be beaten up or thrown out of that classroom. These are the standards of our educational facilities in a lot of these childcare institutions.
So when you see the reformative program built around the JJ Act being run as a mockery, then you get really irritated that okay, here is this beautiful observation home, and in this observation home what happens? Children are sexually abused by each other, by the staff, drugs goes inside, alcohol is available, every second day there is escape happening. So where is the reform?
A 17-year-old boy who was arrested for theft has died in juvenile custody after allegedly being brutally assaulted by his fellow inmates. In his dying declaration, the boy, who named 2 of them as well as the warden of a juvenile home in Matunga.
The situations are bad enough that sometimes these children prefer going back to their situations than living in that shelter care.
They're good for taking care of the child while the child is in the institution, if the institution is providing for what it's supposed to. But in terms of reintegration and all, we all assume the moment we hand over the child to the family, restored, rehabilitated, reintegrated, matter over.
चिल्ड्रंस होम को जेल ही समझते हैं, लोगों को क्या जेल और चिल्ड्रंस होम क्या होता है कब पता है. जेल में गया था, कोई बोलता है ये अंदर गया था, और फिर वो बच्चों को खेलने नहीं देते थे, और 1-2 बच्चे तो स्कूल चेंज करना पड़ा उनको.
We as a society, we failed miserably to to give confidence in reformative programs.
This child who was on the street for more than 6 years, we did not worry about him because CNCP are not our concern. We only respond when they, because of neglect, because of wrong company, they commit an offense and then they pose a threat to us. Then they become our target and all our vengeance is against this one child. And we have always said that hard cases do not make good law.
All we're saying and all our suggestions finish at is lock them up. That's all our work finishes at.
The result is going to be that by the time the child is out of prison, he's going to be a hardened criminal because he will know no better and there'll have been no rehabilitation in the adult criminal system.
I think it's not even retribution, it's just revenge. I don't even think it's proportional justice at this point.
We've completely gone bizarre, as far as children are concerned. I don't think we love them anymore.
So let's just forget about this. Let's go back to being the humane country we used to be when we didn't have such an indecent law.
That home became my own little hell. I spent my days trying to get by, scratching the walls, notching the days that went by. These weren't children anymore, at least in here we weren't. It was a long time before I saw light again. By that point, I was already one of them. Calling someone a criminal is one thing. I now became one. Think I had a chance? Think again.